Hi everyone, it's Katrina. We have incredible evidence that tells us exactly how the pyramids were built. There is also a new discovery that tells us the moment that fire became part of our lives. Let's unearth some hidden truths of the ancient world, so hit that subscribe button and let's go. This is how they really built the pyramids. What if I told you that scientists know exactly how the Great Pyramid of Giza was built because they have the paperwork for it? In 2013, a team of French and Egyptian archaeologists uncovered the actual blueprint for the pyramid in a cave. The cave is at the edge of the Red Sea near the ancient port of Wadi El Jarf. The blueprint isn't what you might be imagining. It wasn't a blue sheet of paper with diagrams on it. What archaeologists found were scraps of inscribed papyrus scattered across the cave floor. The pieces of papyrus proved to be among the oldest ever discovered in Egypt. It took about a year, but Egyptologists Pierre Taillet and Gregory Maurard successfully published the translation of the pages. The papyrus fragments were from a logbook used during the 27th year that Pharaoh Khufu reigned over Egypt. The hieroglyphic letters were written more than 4,500 years ago. I know that's just a number, but it is a huge number. You were living closer to the time of Cleopatra than Cleopatra was living to the time this logbook was written. The logbook belonged to an inspector named Merer. He worked for several months on the construction operations at the Great Pyramid as it neared completion. Merer wrote reports on the daily lives of the construction workers. He made notes about the limestone blocks being quarried at nearby Tura. The blocks were brought to the pyramid where they were used to cover its exterior. The inspector even described precisely how the enormous limestone blocks were brought to the pyramid. Archaeologists have argued over how the pyramid stones were transported for centuries. And now the exact method is written on papyrus written by someone who was there. It doesn't get any better than this. Merer said the blocks were transported by boat up the Nile River and then along a system of canals. The canals allowed the Egyptians to bring the giant blocks directly to the construction site. The entire journey took about 3 days from the quarry to the pyramid. You might be surprised to learn that Merer wasn't only working on the pyramids. As stated in his logbook, he did other jobs too. Merer oversaw a team of specialist sailors who worked on a plethora of construction projects, including building a harbor at the edge of the Mediterranean Sea. That was in the same year they worked on the pyramid. They were extremely busy. This is such a profound discovery that it sort of removes a bit of the mystery surrounding the pyramids. These are official documents proving the pyramid was built by ordinary laborers who weren't any different than we are today. The workers moved 2.3 million blocks along waterways and stacked them up into a giant triangle. It took approximately 23 years to complete the project, wrapping up around the year 2560 BC. The pyramid was a major success. It remained the tallest structure in the world at 450 feet for the next 4,000 years. Still, scientists have never confirmed why it was built, or if it was even a tomb in the first place. Lucky for us, there are still some mysteries to be solved. Rewriting the history of America. At a place known as the end of the world, archaeologists recently unearthed something that has never been found before. They uncovered the bones of 2 animals surrounded by 13,400-year-old spear points. Those are some very old spear points. The spear points belonged to the Clovis culture. If you've never heard of them before, you're in for a real treat. As far as archaeologists are concerned, the Clovis people were part of the first defined culture in the Americas. Perhaps there were humans before them, but the Clovis were the first sophisticated culture, sharing in one way of life. The Clovis lived across much of the United States. The oldest and southernmost Clovis site is El Fin del Mundo, or aka the end of the world. It's located in Mexico's Sonora Desert. It was here where researchers found the bones of gomphotheres. What in the world is a gomphothere? It was sort of like a mastodon, so basically a prehistoric elephant. I know it's hard to imagine it now, but 13,000 years ago, there were giant elephants wandering across Mexico. How cool would that be to see today? Scientists at the University of Arizona said this revolutionary discovery is forcing them to question the origin of early humans. Archaeologist Thomas Jennings said we as a species might need to rethink the whole process of how the Americas were colonized. Up until now, it was assumed that the Clovis culture originated in the American Southwest. They crossed the Bering Land Bridge from Siberia to Alaska, and then kept migrating south until they found a comfortable place to start their civilization. This would have been in California or Utah, somewhere in the general area. This may be totally wrong though. The Clovis site in Mexico is older than all of the Clovis sites in the United States. Now, scientists are wondering if the Clovis didn't migrate north rather than south, which means they may have come from South America. It's crazy, but not impossible. The Clovis clearly had sophisticated methods of survival. They hunted megafauna like bison, woolly mammoths, and mastodons. Now, thanks to this new discovery, scientists know they also hunted giant gomphotheres. Gomphotheres were huge pachyderms who lived in the ancient grasslands until they went extinct 10,000 years ago, perhaps at the end of a Clovis spear. This just adds to the mystery of how long have humans really been in the Americas. This mountain is a secret nuclear power plant. Mount Kailash is shaped like a pyramid for a reason. Not only is this holy mountain the birthplace of 4 of the biggest religions in Asia, but it's also said to contain a secret nuclear reactor built by aliens. Mount Kailash can be found in Tibet, an ancient country sometimes known as the roof of the world. It was here amidst the snowy mountains where historians believe that Hinduism, Jainism, and Buddhism all began, and also the religion of Bon, which is almost forgotten these days. At some point in humanity's distant past, it is believed that aliens visited Earth and built a nuclear reactor in Tibet. Evidence of this theory has been found in the form of nuclear ash scattered across the mountain, which has no natural reason for being there. Evidence has also been found inside dead bodies. Corpses discovered on the mountain often contain traces of radioactive elements. There is no realistic reason for somebody buried in the ice and snow to be affected by radioactivity. I mentioned earlier, we still haven't learned why the pyramids of Giza were built, and the why is the most important part. Many people believe the pyramids of Giza, along with the pyramids of Mesoamerica and Mesopotamia, were used as gigantic batteries. Lo and behold, Mount Kailash is shaped just like a pyramid. A very, very big and very snowy pyramid. Ancient cultures associated pyramids with the teleportation of souls into the afterlife. It was probably why pharaohs so desperately wanted to be buried under pyramids. It was likely why Maya pyramids were used by shamans to communicate with the gods in rituals. What if this association isn't due to mythology? Is it possible that alien visitors used pyramids as energy conductors to power their machines? If that's true, it's logical to believe their pyramid-powered machines allowed them to move across space and possibly even time. Don't you wish you had a time machine of your own to go back and see the pyramids in action? Many theorists have suggested that Mount Kailash is one piece of a destroyed worldwide power grid. Unless archaeologists are willing to peel the mountain open like a can of tuna, and I doubt they even have the means to do it, you and I will never know what is hiding in the heart of the mountain. And now for a quick break, but first I want to give a big shout out to Andreas Rodriguez and Matt Rayola for supporting this channel. We wouldn't be here without you guys. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already to join the Origins Explained family. What your urine can tell a medieval doctor. If you've ever had something medically wrong with you, you may have had to give a doctor a urine sample. This isn't anything new. In the Middle Ages, doctors also requested urine samples, but what they did with them might gross you out. It was all about the urine wheel. Not to be confused with some sort of prize wheel, the urine wheel was used by doctors to diagnose their patients based on the color of their urine. It was a chart in the form of a wheel, found in the office of medieval physicians. Don't worry, I'm going to give you a breakdown of the wheel just in case you want to make your own and set up a medieval doctor's office in your own backyard. The wheel was divided into 20 different parts. Each section corresponded to a different color of urine. Prepare to be alarmed because some of these colors seem like they could only come from mutants or aliens. What in the world were medieval people putting in their bodies? 20 shades of pee, including red, green, orange, and brown. If you're peeing green on a regular basis, please stop watching this right now and go to the doctor. The urine wheel was about more than just color. Doctors also tasted and smelled the samples to get a better idea of what was ailing their patients. This was peak medieval doctoring. The first known use of the wheel was in 1506. German physician Ulrich Pinder analyzed the color, the smell, and the taste and then made his diagnosis. He was able to use his fancy wheel to more easily identify certain diseases. Grossness aside, this was pretty smart. Medieval physicians knew if a patient was suffering from an infection. They even knew if somebody was diabetic by the taste. Pretty advanced stuff for being that long ago. A Stone Age technological breakthrough. Long before the pyramids of Egypt or the Great Wall of China, a forgotten civilization in Scandinavia was building sophisticated structures. In Scandinavia 5,000 years ago, a prehistoric culture made a gigantic leap in construction technology. Scientists have only now found proof of this leap. It's making them rethink everything they know about the ancient ancestors of the Vikings. About 6,000 years ago, the funnel beaker culture emerged in Scandinavia. They evolved from hunter-gatherers who survived the Ice Age. The culture transitioned from a nomadic lifestyle to one of agriculture and animal domestication. Instead of sleeping in tents or in caves as they moved across northern Europe, they started living in houses. This was a big moment for humans as a species. I mean, people still live in houses today, right? The house was an awesome invention. What researchers have found, though, is that along with the house came another ingenious invention. In Denmark, archaeological excavations of some very early houses revealed stone-paved cellars. The funnel beaker culture was one step away from figuring out how to make concrete bunkers. The initial analysis by scientists in Denmark revealed the cellars were made from a mixture of sand and clay called loam. Guess what one of the most important flooring materials used in more than 1 billion homes today is? It's loam. The formula has hardly changed in 5,000 years. Archaeologists found that the houses were built at a slight elevation to provide an excellent view of the area while remaining above the flood zone. The underground cellars could have easily been used as food storage. The cellars would have kept perishables cold in the summer and prevented them from freezing in the winter. The oldest house dates to about 3080 BC, but there is something else that has scientists confused. They found evidence of a much older fence from 3600 BC. The fence suggests that there were houses built here even earlier, but they were obliterated by something. Something like maybe a global flood. Who gave humanity the written word? Imagine a world without words. A world where ideas were etched into clay, not inked onto paper. A world where symbols, not sounds, carried the weight of human thought. This was the world of the ancient Mesopotamians, a world shaped by a mysterious technology, the cylinder seal. Before written language, there were cylinder seals. Scientists think that these ancient artifacts may have played a critical role in the rise of early Mesopotamian civilizations. But as with so many forms of ancient technology, where it came from has proven the biggest mystery. Some have blamed the gods. 300 years before early Scandinavians started building houses, the world's first writing system was invented in Uruk, southern Iraq. The year was 3350 BC, and humanity was forever altered. With written language came stories, records, and an ability to expand human civilization beyond anything seen before. Only there is a missing piece of the puzzle a lot of people don't know about. Before there was cuneiform writing in Uruk, there were cylinder seals. These mysterious seals were used as early as 4400 BC, or almost 6,500 years ago. The design was simplistic and easy to understand. A cylindrical clay object was carved with symbols that looked a lot like Egyptian hieroglyphics. When the cylindrical object was rolled across soft clay, its symbols were left in a perfect row of imprints. Clay seals were used at temple institutions to track the movements of goods like textiles and agricultural products. They preceded all known written records. Even in a society without a written language, people understood basic symbols. For example, merchants would know that a dragon symbol represented corn. The symbols on the seals evolved, eventually becoming the foundation for cuneiform. But where did the seals come from in the first place? Ancient alien enthusiasts would have you believe that Mesopotamians copied the writing techniques of intelligent beings who came from another world. But then again, maybe humans are just super smart. We should give ourselves at least a little credit for discovering language. After all, we did discover the wheel, and scientists think they may have finally figured out when. That's coming up right now. All hail the wonderful wheel. What if the humble wheel, a cornerstone of modern civilization, was born not in a grand workshop, but in a dark, muddy mine? The wheel is one of the oldest mysteries of humanity. The three greatest inventions of all time are the wheel, sliced bread, and maybe let's say toilet paper for the third. Now scientists think they have tracked down where the very first wheel was built. It is not in a place you would expect. Around the year 3900 BC, Neolithic humans were mining for minerals in the Carpathian Mountains. This great mountain range spans more than 930 miles, encompassing huge stretches of Central and Eastern Europe, including Romania, Poland, Ukraine, and Slovakia. Neolithic humans needed a way to get their ore out of the mountains without carrying it on their backs like pack mules. The very first wheels were ordinary wooden logs. I know, anticlimactic, right? Scientists Lee R. Alacoque and Richard W. Bouvier used computational structural mechanics to figure out how the wheel evolved in these ancient mines. It started with humans pushing heavy objects over bilateral rollers. These were smooth logs placed under objects, but it was a tedious process. You had to repeatedly move the rollers as the object was pushed, like a manual conveyor belt. The next step in wheel evolution was grooved bilateral rollers. Neolithic humans carved circular grooves into logs and then fixed them in place with semicircular sockets on a wooden box. This was a genius move. They could put ore into a box, push the box on a pair of rollers, and then push the whole thing. The only problem was friction, and that was where the wheel and axle system came into play. The mountain miners learned to separate the rolling mechanism from the wheel, thus the wheel and the axle. Now you know how the wheel developed. So what's the oldest wheel that has ever been found? That would be the Ljubljana Marshes wheel, found in Slovenia and estimated to be 5,350 years old. It has a square hole in the middle showing it was fixed to an axle. No earlier wheel has ever been found. So there you have it. Humans made the wheel and nothing has been the same since. Ancient humans knew too much. Ancient humans knew too much about geology, physics, and astronomy. Scientists are trying to understand how they built what might be the most impressive monument of the Stone Age. 6,000 years ago, more than 7 centuries before the Ljubljana Marshes wheel was crafted, a megalith of incredible proportions was built in Spain. It's called the Dolmen of Menga. And while you kind of want to compare it to Stonehenge because of its age and the fact it's made of stone, it wouldn't be a fair comparison. The Dolmen of Menga isn't a stone circle, and there are a lot of stone circles in Europe. They are all impressive in their own way, but stone circles are a dime a dozen. The dolmen is a burial monument for which no other example exists. Researchers in Spain say the dolmen is completely unique. They also say the construction techniques used in building the dolmen are comparable to modern construction techniques used in more recent megastructures. It's infinitely frustrating to wonder how indigenous people who had never built anything like the Dolmen of Menga pulled it off flawlessly. How did they do it? The logistics, the mobilization of labor, the sophisticated design, everything went off without a hitch. The builders likely used advanced principles of geology, geometry, astronomy, and physics to fit dozens of giant blocks together in perfect harmony. Each of the building blocks is preposterously big. I don't even want to tell you how big they are because it doesn't make any sense. Here are the numbers you need to know. The megalith is 90 feet long and 20 feet wide, and it reaches a height of 11 feet. You could hold a wedding inside the dolmen and have enough room for a dance floor. There are a total of 32 giant stones within the structure. Some of them weigh more than 200 tons. 200! Now, could somebody please explain how this was possible? For the sake of argument, let's say the ancient people in Spain had figured out how to make the wheel. Would their primitive wheels have carried 200-ton boulders? Do you know how heavy that is? Here's a good comparison so that you fully understand how impossible this megalith is. The largest stones in the Great Pyramid of Giza are only 80 tons. That is less than half as heavy as the stones in Spain. Then there's the body problem. You must have known there would be at least one body inside the tomb, only there were way more than one. When archaeologists excavated the dolmen, they discovered hundreds of human skeletons. Everyone had been stuffed into the dolmen and then buried. But why? Was this part of a normal human burial ritual? What was going on here? They must have been really advanced to move 200-ton rocks. A standard dump truck only carries about 10 tons, and most standard pickup trucks can't tow more than 5 tons. Let me know any theories or explanations you have in the comments below. AI reveals fiery human mystery. Artificial intelligence has been a major blessing to archaeologists. A computer program has now solved a mystery that human scientists have failed to crack at every turn. The AI has gone back in time to identify what might just be the earliest technological development in the human family tree. But there is one thing you need to know. The people who came up with this technological innovation were not exactly human. They were ancient ancestors of Homo sapiens. Modern humans as a species wouldn't develop for another 500,000 years or so. I'm talking about fire. Israeli researchers at the Weizmann Institute of Science used machine learning techniques to discover things that the human eye cannot see. When archaeologists investigate Stone Age tools, there is only so much they can learn from looking at the rock. Scientists at the Weizmann Institute used AI and spectroscopy to look closer. They looked at the molecular structure of ancient stone tools found at the Evron quarry site in Israel. The AI program was able to identify chemical markers left behind by heat exposure. This is something that human eyes would never be able to do on their own. The AI software pinpointed specific chemical changes caused by controlled fire as opposed to wildfire. The markings on the stone tools prove that people were playing with fire. What is doubly amazing is that Evron Quarry was occupied 800,000 years ago. If you really think about it, this discovery is mind-blowing. The first technological revolution wasn't even made by us. Our extinct hominin friends paved the way for our innovations by mastering the flame itself. Egyptian secrets in the stars. When archaeologists uncovered a humongous observatory in an ancient Egyptian city, they didn't realize the scope of the mystery that they were about to unleash upon the world. Now they are stuck sifting through the ruins of time for an answer to a question that no one even knows how to ask. But I'll do my best to ask it anyway. 2,500 years ago, why were the Egyptians so obsessed with tracking the movement of the sun and the stars? Did they see something in the heavens that modern scientists have missed? Michelle Starr from Science Alert said that the Egyptians were among the most adept astronomers in ancient history. They were the ones who created the 365-day calendar, which I talked a little bit about in a recent video. Be sure to check it out if you missed it. The Egyptians also completed a detailed map of the night sky. They have their very own constellations, many of which have survived to this day. At the newly found observatory, archaeologists have already found a treasure trove of religious artifacts. They've uncovered pieces of jewelry, broken statues, and tables used specifically for offerings. Egypt's Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities said the observatory stood in the ancient city of Kafr el-Sheikh. It's still early, but initial estimates say it's the largest observatory of its kind, almost 10,000 square feet. It even has one of the biggest sundials you'll ever see in your life. The ancient timepiece is made from limestone blocks over 15 feet long. The Egyptians were masters of blending religion and science. The entrance hall of the observatory faces east toward the sunrise. Its design resembles Egyptian temples. It was used for scientific observation and religious ceremonies. All of this information, and I still haven't answered the question of why the Egyptians were so obsessed with space. To do that, I'll have to take you to a different location, the Temple of Esna, also in Egypt. Inside the Temple of Esna, you will find some of the clearest representations of the cosmos anywhere in Egypt. There are hallways decorated with paintings of Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. The Egyptians knew about other planets, even though they didn't have telescopes to look at them. At least no Egyptian telescopes have ever been discovered. On the ceiling of one chamber inside the temple are the 12 signs of the zodiac. Hallways are decorated with bizarre hybrid animals that look like they could have come from the planet Nibiru. There are also depictions of specific stars that were used to measure time. The Temple of Esna is the ultimate astrological center in Egypt. It's also the answer to the question of where the Egyptians got their love of the stars. They were obsessed with the zodiac because the Babylonians were obsessed with the zodiac. The Babylonians were the ones who developed the zodiac system. It was then introduced to Egypt around the 4th century BC, shortly after the death of Alexander the Great. Signs of the zodiac became hugely popular among Egyptians. By 300 BC, Egyptians had begun to decorate their tombs with their birth signs. Their horoscopes were inscribed on shattered pieces of pottery and left inside their burial chambers. There are only 3 examples of the Egyptian zodiac alive today. One is at the Temple of Esna, and another is in the Hathor Temple at Dendera. The zodiac at Dendera has been called the only complete map of the ancient sky. You can see it for yourself at the Louvre Museum in Paris. Metallurgy used to be deadly. New technologies often had unintended consequences. When some societies began working with a new type of natural ore, they got a bit more than they bargained for. Generations of smiths and miners ended up crippled and deformed. When humans learned how to shape metal, that was the first step in real civilization. Forget wheels and boats, metal was the game changer. It all started in the 4th millennium BC with a new technology called metallurgy. The first important alloy produced by humans was bronze. Bronze was the best. Bronze flooded the Near East, where it was used in the production of everything from tools to weapons. It was much harder than stone and much more resilient than copper. There was only one problem. Bronze was sort of toxic. The first people to make bronze did so by mixing copper ore with tin. This produced something called arsenical bronze, the worst kind of bronze because it is full of arsenic. And arsenic is extremely toxic. As more civilizations learned this new technology, they too were exposed to arsenical bronze. People such as the Akkadians, the Amorites, and the Sican culture of northwestern Peru. In 1987, a study was published in the British Journal of Medicine analyzing how arsenic bronze alloys affected people who worked the metal. Nothing would have been too bad at first, but long-term exposure would have proved hazardous. Blacksmiths would have suffered from dermatitis, a weakness in the feet and legs, and neurological problems. Depending on the intensity of their exposure to arsenic, they would have become crippled. And they likely knew what was happening. Like cigarette smokers who knew their lungs are blackening, blacksmiths may have known they were on the road to ruin. This is evident from the mythological smithy gods of the ancient world. In ancient Greece, Hephaestus was the god of the forge. He was depicted as crippled and extremely ugly. In a world of beautiful Olympians, Hephaestus was the ugly duckling. The forge god's lameness and scarred face could be traced back to early blacksmiths who suffered from arsenic poisoning. Volunder from Scandinavia and Vulcan from Rome and Ilmarinen from Finland are all forge gods, and they all are crippled and disfigured. It can't be a coincidence. Do you know who else suffered from arsenic poisoning? None other than everyone's favorite Iceman, Otzi. Otzi lived in 3200 BC and died frozen as a popsicle in the Alps. Weirdly, scientists found high levels of arsenic particles in his hair. The presence of arsenic makes a lot more sense now that we know the dangerous secret of early metallurgy. The thing about Otzi that not many people know is that he may have been a blacksmith. The axe Otzi carried when he died was 99.7% pure, suggesting he made it himself. Being a blacksmith may be how he got arsenic in his hair.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed.
The mystery monoliths. In November 2020, a mysterious metal monolith showed up in Utah. A monolith is a large single upright pillar, usually made of stone. It was discovered by state officials who at the time had been counting sheep from a helicopter. It was completely bizarre and looked an awful lot like the strange monolith from Stanley Kubrick's cult classic, 2001: A Space Odyssey. In the movie, the monolith is placed on the planet by extraterrestrials to jumpstart human evolution. But with the Utah monolith, it didn't appear to spark anything. It was in the middle of nowhere. Within a week, the monolith became a massive tourist attraction. Internet investigators used Google Earth to pinpoint its exact location and learned it had likely been sitting there since 2015. For over 5 years, the monolith probably sat in the desert and no one ever noticed it. And yet the moment it was swarmed by tourists, it vanished. A second monolith appeared in Romania. Days after, it was gone. At the start of December 2020, a third monolith was discovered in California at the peak of a hiking path on Pine Mountain. Within a short amount of time, a fourth monolith appeared in Pittsburgh and a fifth in Las Vegas. The one in Pittsburgh was just a publicity stunt by the owner of a shop to get more people to buy candy. But finally, a sixth monolith was discovered in the Netherlands on December 6, 2020. No other monoliths have been found since, and we don't know where these ones came from. We don't know if they were left behind by aliens or if it was some kind of elaborate hoax. If it was a hoax, it was pretty impressive to get all the monoliths in position around the globe within just days of each other. And for another matter, why had the first one been in the desert for so long? There's so many questions. Pluto's Gate. Pluto's Gate was discovered in 2013 in the country of Turkey. This archaeological site exactly matches the description of a supposed temple leading to the underworld. This temple disappeared from the history books in the 6th century, but in ancient times had been viewed as a very literal portal to hell. As the Greek philosopher Strabo described it, this space is filled with a vapor so misty and dense that you can hardly see the ground. This place was creepy. As far as the story goes, tourists traveled from all across the ancient world to visit this temple and see for themselves the place where you could descend into oblivion. It was one of the biggest conspiracies in Greek-controlled territories 2,000 years ago. Tourists and pilgrims who arrived here, even if they were skeptical, left fully convinced that the underworld was real. When they came upon the gates, they could purchase a small bird or some other animal, like we might purchase a hot dog at a ball game. Then they let the animals loose at the gate, where the creature would immediately die. The only people who didn't die after crossing the threshold of the temple were the priests. The thing about Pluto's Gate is that it's located directly above a crack in the ground. This fissure releases poisonous gas. When a small bird or other animal gets caught in the fumes, they immediately die. The only reason the priests were able to stand it for short periods was that they were incredibly high and hallucinating, but had grown somewhat used to it. The Aluches. In Maya mythology, there is a tale about small humanoid creatures, kind of like goblins, who cause immense chaos. They are called the Aluches, or the Little People, and the conspiracy of these mischievous beings has been passed down for centuries. They cause destruction, mayhem, and trouble wherever they go. Believe it or not, some people still think these things are real. They allegedly live around the Yucatan Peninsula and are completely invisible to humans, and can be found frolicking in the jungle and rooting around deep in caves. But of course, no one can actually see them. Not unless they wish to make themselves visible. And when they do, they look really bizarre. They have giant eyes like an owl, move quickly like a squirrel, and have various animal body parts. Pieces from a bird, parts of a deer, skin like an iguana, you know. They are exceptionally frightening figures, and sometimes leer at people in the dark with their red eyes, just to make them scared for fun. While these creatures are more of a superstition today, the Maya wholeheartedly believed in them. They were said to appear to travelers as they journeyed through the jungle. An Alux would often ask for an offering, and if the traveler refused, They would gather others of their kind and cause trouble for the traveler for the rest of their journey. Sometimes they would even make them sick and then bite them at night. The Super Dad. You may have heard the strange claim that almost every person in the world is a descendant of the great Genghis Khan. Well, this isn't some kind of crazy conspiracy, and it's not an anecdotal piece of history. It's a very real thing, even if it is hard to believe. Genghis Khan was the ruler of the Mongol Empire between 1162 and 1227. He was a ruthless warrior famous for his sexual appetite. He sired so many children with so many different women, and he did it in so many places that he has countless descendants. A massive genetic study was done in 2013 and published in the science journal Nature. Researchers discovered that as many as 16 million living males are directly linked to the Mongolian ruler. So while that's not most people on the planet, it is a lot. National Geographic reports that nearly 8% of the men around the region of the former Mongol Empire have Y chromosomes that are nearly identical. Y chromosomes pass on chunks of DNA that rarely change over generations. Using random genetic markers, scientists can go back in time and trace them to when they first occurred, in this case, 1,000 years ago. What's really shocking is that the results weren't even a big surprise. The experts say this kind of thing has happened all throughout history. Powerful men often fathered children with as many women as possible to keep their lineage going. As the researchers said, this spread of patrilineage from father to son was by selection, not by chance. Genghis Khan was no exception. He had at least 6 wives and 500 concubines, which were all female rulers and royal family members of territories he had conquered, or gifts from allies and friends. And apparently, he made time for all of them. The Bear Lake Monster. The Bear Lake Monster is a conspiracy of a different kind. The creature in question is rooted in Native American folklore, with its first modern sighting in 1868. These days, nobody knows if the monster in the lake is a conspiracy, maybe like the Loch Ness Monster, or a myth that refuses to die. What we know for sure is that the monster has been spotted in Bear Lake, near the Utah-Idaho border, for hundreds of years. The Native Americans first told stories of a great sea beast living in the lake before Europeans ever showed up, something they called a water devil. This thing is supposedly like a marine serpent, extraordinarily fast and unlike anything else living in the area. When the settlers came, they learned the stories from the Native Americans. But the myth kept on going, and in 1868, sightings of the creature leaked into the local Desert News newspaper. Swimmers were allegedly being abducted by this beast when they got too close to the water's edge. It actually scared the residents from wandering into its depths. People wouldn't camp near the lake, and it became a quietly agreed-upon danger zone. Maybe that was the plan all along, to keep people away. Over the next century and a half, sightings continued to come in sporadically. A man named Mike Havertz was one of the most recent people to claim that he saw the beast. He said that while he was out on a boat with some friends, a horrible monster, something he couldn't see very well because it was underneath the surface, went by quickly, creating waves nearly 20 feet high. Yet no matter how hard the experts search for this monster, it's never been found. And now for number 5. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Becca and Mary Wisdom. We will definitely have some more Antarctica videos for you soon. Keep an eye out for a surprise. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. The Patsy Conspiracy. The Patsy Conspiracy was a very real conspiracy by every definition. It was a secret plot by members of the wildly powerful Patsy family of Renaissance Florence to dispose of the Medici family, the rulers of Florence. It all started because of the Pope, the complex banking system, and a piece of land. Giovanni della Rovere, who had been appointed prefect of Rome, wanted to purchase the small town of Imola. His plan was to create a new papal state. However, Lorenzo de' Medici, head of the wealthy Medici banking family, wanted to purchase the town for himself. When Giovanni went to purchase the town, hoping to use funds from the Medici bankers, they turned him down, and so he went to the Pazzi Bank, and in the end, Imola was out of Lorenzo's reach. What happened next is almost unbelievable. The Pazzi family got the Medici family out of their way for good and went to Pope Sixtus for approval. And while the Pope didn't technically sanction the assassination, he said it would be in everyone's interest if the Medici bankers were gone. The assassination was a total miss. They killed Lorenzo's brother on April 26, 1478, but Lorenzo survived, and he secured the Medici's power in Florence while banishing the Pazzi family forever. The Knights Templar. The Order of the Knights Templar was founded on Christmas Day 1119 by Baldwin II, King of Jerusalem. What started as a group of French knights became an order of noble warriors protecting pilgrims in the Holy Land, and later on, an army of extraordinarily wealthy Christian militants who waged war against those who would threaten the Holy Land. They continued fighting until they were betrayed, slaughtered, and destroyed beyond repair in 1291. All these years later, the Knights Templar are still a source of major conspiracy theories. But what you might not know is that the conspiracy theories started a very long time ago, almost immediately after they were executed. In the 13th century, the German poet Wolfram von Eschenbach wrote a story about the Knights Templar being the guardians of the Holy Grail. This story has never gone away, even though it was probably just a tale told through a poem. And finally, it was the confessions tortured out of the Knights Templar by the minions of King Philip IV that made them infamous with the occult. They admitted to worshipping Baphomet, which inspired yet another tale in Henry Agrippa's 16th century book, De Occulta Philosophia. The stories surrounding the purpose of the Knights Templar, their religious knowledge, secrets, and treasures track them all over the world, and they are given credit for everything from hiding the Ark of the Covenant in Ethiopia to bringing treasure to Oak Island in the United States. Great Tartaria. The conspiracy theory of the ancient kingdom of Great Tartaria first showed up in Russia. It was Anatoly Fomenko who wrote a pseudo-historical conspiracy theory book called New Chronology. This was where the idea of Great Tartaria started, but it has since spiraled way out of control. Great Tartaria was a highly advanced civilization spread across the entire world, with its heartland being in Russia. Buildings like New York's Penn Station, the Singer Building, and even the grounds of the 1915's World Fair were all supposedly part of the Tartary Empire. Pretty much any Gilded Age building is said to be a remnant of this great empire. And just wait, because it gets even crazier. The theory says that a great flood of mud wiped out most of the ancient world prior to World War I. World War I and World War II were partially fought to help erase all evidence of the Tartary architecture still standing in Europe. These people believe that a great Russian empire already dominated the earth centuries ago, building every major structure from the White House to the Pyramid of Giza. The theory is really the canon of architecture, according to Bloomberg's Zach Mortiz. It's about as realistic as the earth being flat. The Scottish Freemasons. The Freemasons are a very real organization, one of the oldest and most widespread fraternities in the world. Members of the Freemasons have included names such as George Washington, Harry Houdini, Winston Churchill, and even Mormon founder Joseph Smith. And because these guys are so secretive, it's no surprise that they are at the center of quite a few conspiracy theories. The earliest known document of the Freemasons being wrapped up in some bizarre conspiracy comes from 1786. It was claimed that the Freemasons worked together with the Illuminati and the Order of Jesuits to form the New World Order. This order would discreetly manipulate world events into whatever the group saw fit. And here's a little juicy information. On the US $1 bill, the Latin phrase Novus Ordo Seclorum has been printed since 1935. The direct translation is New World Order. There is no definitive proof the Freemasons are behind every major event since the 1700s. However, there's no proof against it either. These guys have been around since the medieval days, originally formed as a group of Scottish stonemasons. So now conspiracy theorists are having a blast. The vampire Carmilla. If you were to ask who is the original vampire, most people would probably answer with Dracula. While the character of Dracula was probably inspired by Ivan the Terrible, there is a completely different story about vampires in old literature. Years before Dracula was ever written by Bram Stoker, there was another vampire story. Joseph Sheridan Le Fanu is the original vampire novelist. He wrote the novella Carmilla in 1871. His book was a first-person account given by a young Englishwoman named Laura who fell prey to the beautiful vampire Carmilla, another lady. In this original vampire tale, Carmilla and Laura fall into a steamy romantic relationship. The maidens in the nearby towns are afflicted by a strange illness. They all eventually die, and then Laura becomes sick. She also has a recurring nightmare that a giant cat is attacking her in the night. The giant cat turned out to be Carmilla, her lover, who is also a vampire. Carmilla is eventually hunted down, staked through the yard, decapitated, and then burned. It's a pretty gruesome story, and many argue that this was the original that influenced the legend of Dracula. But since Dracula was written in Victorian times, when society was seriously suppressed and held under extremely strict moral laws, it faded into obscurity and never got famous. But when Bram Stoker's account of a male vampire came out, it became an enormous success. The big difference was that Carmilla was a lady, having relations with another lady. That was enough to cover the story up for 145 years, while Dracula reigned as the world's first famous vampire, when in fact it was Carmilla. Thanks for watching! What's your favorite vampire story out there? Let me know in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. See you next time. Bye!